polka. Pick out your partner and join in the fun. The Pennsylvania polka. It started in Scranton, it's now number one. It's bound to entertain ya. Everybody has the mania to do the polka from Pennsylvania. While they're dancing, everybody's cares are quickly gone. Sweet romancing, this goes on and on until the dawn. They're so carefree, gay with laughter, happy as can be. They stop to have a beer and the crowd begins to cheer. They kiss and then they start to dance again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Links Oddcast, your source for information and discussion about all things having to do with the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. On this episode, we've got a very special guest joining us from Pennsylvania. So sit back and relax and enjoy the rest of the music while we get everybody into the studio for this exciting episode of the Three Links Oddcast. Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. We are the Three Links Oddcast. So happy to be here. We want to make sure we thank our wonderful sponsors, Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. They make some fantastic soaps and other bath products. Really great stuff, people. Just go out, buy all of it. They've got their winter collection in now. That I actually got a preview of some of it. They have a soap that smells like gingerbread. So if you like cleanliness, you're going to love Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff. I'm Toby Hansen, one of your hosts. Another of our hosts, Brother Sergio, he is on assignment tonight. Now, we've loaned him out to our Material Sciences division here at the Three Links Oddcast. So he's doing some deep cover research for us right now. Hopefully, we'll get him back for the next episode. And next up, we have Ainsley.
Hello, I'm Ainsley Heilich, and we have a special guest tonight. But first, I would like to issue a correction to our last episode on Oddfellow presidents and other politicians. So we were corrected by
past Grand Patriarch Nora Carria. She sent us a Facebook message, which we encourage all of our listeners to do. If you're on Facebook, send us a message from time to time. Let us know that you're listening. She shared some really important information with us.
And we are devastated that we made this error, but we also, in the true, spirit of Oddfellowship, we are pursuers of the truth. And we want to extend that to our listeners. So we had falsely said that President Chester Alan Arthur had been famously known for wearing a coat with a beaver fur lapel collar. We were incorrect on that assertion. it was not beaver fur, it was Persian lamb. So for all you sartorialists out there, Chester Arthur wore Persian lamb.
That is correct. And we want to thank past Grand Patriarch Nora, A, for listening to the show, and B, for checking up on us like that. Her expertise is in clothing, fashion, and costume design. So we really appreciate her checking up on us and making sure that we keep everything as it's supposed to be. Because it's not friendship, love, and whatever we feel like saying. It's friendship, love, and truth. So we try and stick to the truth as much as we can here. And then a second note that came to us from the Oddfellows Presidents episode, somebody had emailed and asked, what about President Harry Truman? Well, Harry Truman is always included on these lists of Oddfellow presidents, but there's no actual research or information that any of us could find that demonstrates that he was actually a member of the Oddfellows. Now, we all know Harry Truman was a very prominent Freemason, and he was, I believe, Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri of the Freemasons. But there's no evidence that we could come across saying that he was a member of the Oddfellows. In fact, one thing that I found while we were doing our research for the show, there's a recording at the Truman Presidential Library where he was giving an address to the executives of the Sovereign Grand Lodge and IARA. And he actually said in the address, I have not had the opportunity to join your fine organization, which pretty much says for sure that he was not an Oddfellow. So those of you who emailed and said, hey, what about Harry Truman? That's the information about Truman. Of course, since we couldn't prove that he was a member, we didn't put it in the show because it was just about people that we know were members. And we have a special guest with us tonight who we know is a member. And Brother Ainsley, I will let you introduce him.
I am very glad to and happy to introduce Justin Bailey from the lovely jurisdiction of Pennsylvania. And interestingly enough, Pennsylvania is not a state. It is one of our 4 commonwealths. And so, Justin, if you could please tell our listeners a little about who you are and how you came to join the Oddfellows, and then what your positions have been in the organization.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's really truly a pleasure to be here. Actually, this September, I will be in the Oddfellows 20 years. I joined when I was 16. I grew up in the anteroom of a lodge hall. My father is a past Grand Master, Charles Bailey. He was Grand Master in the early to mid-90s. He was the youngest Grand Master in the state, which was actually a title I was glad to take off of him when I went in 2013. So that was really something nice to do. But I grew up playing with a pool table with my sister while I hear marching upstairs and singing and stuff. I never knew what it was, but my parents always kept me coming to all the different events that they had. I went to session every year, and I grew up with 30 sets of grandparents. You know, it was really great to learn these people, who they were, and I couldn't wait when I turned 16 to join. So when I turned 16, my dad gave me an application, and 3 months later, I joined Harmony Lodge number 86 in Tamaqua. That lodge actually was instituted in 1843 and consolidated in 1987. They have a 37-acre cemetery, along with a 3-story building downtown. And at that point in time in 87, they just could no longer run it. So they consolidated with a lodge in a nearby community. When they consolidated, they had 95 members, and they just couldn't keep it going with that because they were all so old. But then around 99, 2000, my dad found a lot of people in the community that were interested in keeping the cemetery going. So he got them to start the lodge up again. I joined shortly after, and not too soon after getting my 3 degrees, I ended up as secretary. The only way I got out of secretary was joining the United States Army. And I don't know. Now thinking about it, I should have stayed in as secretary. But yeah, 3.5 years later, I was with the 101st Airborne Division in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So 3.5 years later, I came back and went through the chairs quickly and got back in as secretary. I'm pretty sure I've done at least 15 years of that. And there's no line looking to replace me. So shortly after I got out of past Grand, I was asked to be a Grand Guardian, served 2 years as Grand Guardian, and from there went through the chairs. I served, like I said, as youngest Grand Master from 2013 to 2014. And after that, I went in as Grand Secretary, so I've been there ever since. I just got done doing a 3.5-year stint as Department Commander for Pennsylvania. I was supposed to do 2 years, but the gentleman who was ahead of me, Charlie Shorten, he was active in Sovereign Grand Lodge, and he was from Philadelphia, and he let you know it. A great guy, and unfortunately, he passed away very early into his term. So I ended up doing 3.5 years as Department Commander. I just got done as that. So primarily, I'm just sitting as Grand Secretary right now, but that keeps me busy enough.
So that's fascinating that you mentioned that you are one of the anteroom kids that we hear so many legends of. So I believe you're the youngest anteroom kid that I have met. So anybody out there listening who wants to know about that phenomenon, it used to be more common back in the past where Oddfellows and Rebecca's often might even meet the same evening, and they would just, husbands and wives would bring their kids in tow. To the oldest kid would then watch all the younger kids in the anteroom while the meeting went on in the lodge room. And Dan Davis, who's a past Grandmaster in Illinois, he's a member of our lodge. He's an associate member, and he was an anteroom kid way back when he was a child. So I'm always fascinated by that concept of the multi-generational membership and children being kind of thrust into Oddfellowship without even knowing it. So that's fascinating. And another kind of, just based off of what you just said, being the youngest Grand Master of Pennsylvania, what is it like being a young working person going through the chairs in the Grand Lodge? Is that a very difficult thing? Because a lot of times it seems like it's a retired person's activity. So maybe you could kind of give us a little bit of how that went, just for other people who might be thinking about, doing Grand Lodge type stuff, but they're like, oh, I'll never be able to do it because it's too much work, and I work and I have a family and I got a kid and I can't do this stuff. So maybe you could kind of hopefully encourage some younger people to step up and not scare them away.
Absolutely. Luckily in my area, I was fortunate. My dad was Grand Secretary also. After I came back from Iraq, he did a couple more years. But he had office employees. Back in the 80s, probably into the early 90s, the Grand Secretary was an older guy who kept on the phones while he had 5 or 6 people working in the office, which was a huge drain on our funds. So when my dad took it over, he pretty much got rid of as many people as he could to try and save some money, and realized, hey, if I do some work, I only need a few people. So I ended up actually working for the Grand Lodge as their accountant when I was going through the chairs. And actually, my year as Grand Master, we had 76 lodges. I visited every one in that year. Now, my friend who I had join, Tyler Arnold, I brought him into the lodge, and he went through the chairs too. When I became Grand Master, I asked him to be my marshal. And he worked full-time at a chain restaurant as a cook. Out of the 76 lodges I visited, he made it to 72 of them in 1 year.
That's impressive.
That is.
Yeah. And that's what I told him to run through the chairs. I said, you visited more lodges than a lot of Grand Masters did. But he can be difficult at times, but he's a great guy. But as long as you get the information out early enough to let him know when to take off, you can set a schedule out of work around your work schedule. As long as your boss is willing to work with you and you give him enough notification, it should be easy enough to make it work. You just got to devote some time. And if you can't, at least spend some time figuring how you can make it work, whether it be sending out letters or talking to your district deputies more. Instead of visiting all the lodges, at least visit all the districts, and make sure all the lodges show up to it.
Now, side question to that, how many combined lodge visitations did you do where you'd have 3 or 4 lodges in the area come together for group meetings so you could meet all of them at once?
I didn't do any. I visited all separately because that's what, like, for example, Walker Lodge in Philadelphia. Everybody heard of Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what all the Grand Masters did. They all visited Walker, and all the 5 lodges in the Philadelphia area would converge upon Walker. And that's always great. It really is. But what about those other 5 lodges? That's in Pennsylvania is what makes up the Odd Fellows, is these small lodges of 10 or 11 members that have been sitting in silence for years. So I told them, I'm not coming to Walker this year. I will, and you can be there, and that's nice, but I'm going to still come and visit you. And I want to see how you guys run a meeting. And it was definitely an eye-opener for a lot of them. I was invited to a lot of picnics. I don't come to a meeting. We'll take you out to a picnic or take you out to a restaurant. No, I want to come to see how you operate. And you could tell some of them it was a while until they actually did meet. But once you see the way they responded to it, they were glad to be in there again. They were glad to run a meeting, and it kind of gave them an extra boost again.
Now, I'm going to pull back the curtain just a little bit on being a Grand Master here, because I finished up my term in 2019, last year. And poor Johnny O, he gets to do 2 years in a row because we didn't have our session this year in Washington. But one thing, when you go to a lodge as a Grand Master, not only do you want to see how they run a meeting, because it's quality control. You want to go make sure everybody knows what they need to know and has the tools that they need to do a good meeting. It's also a chance to open the books, make sure everybody's keeping track of everything correctly. So I know exactly what you mean when you say, oh, that's nice, you want to take me to a picnic, but I actually want to see the inside of your lodge hall. I want to see how you function in a meeting, because you uncover some interesting things, especially, I don't know how you're distributed around the state of Pennsylvania and how many, out of the way places that are hard to get to you have. But we have some out of the way lodges here in Washington that a lot of Grand Masters, because of their work schedule or because of the difficulty of travel, they would skip. We have a lodge on Orcas Island up in the San Juans, which is actually closer to Canada than it is any of the mainland United States. Well, that is a minimum 2-day process to visit that lodge. So if you're going to Mount Constitution 88, you've got to book a hotel stay overnight, and you've got to take a ferry boat up there in the morning and then get a reservation on the ferry out of there the next day. So a lot of Grand Masters would skip Mount Constitution, and they developed a lot of sort of unique ways of doing things at Mount Constitution. And since I actually went there multiple times during my time going through the chairs, I was able to see that and go back to them with some really good educational opportunities and say, hey guys, there's more in the world of Odd Fellowship you haven't seen. So I completely understand where you're coming from when you say, no, that's fine. I can eat on the way up. I want to see how you run a meeting.
This makes a great transition point to pivot for the main meat and potatoes of the episode, and why we have Brother Justin here today. That accountability and oversight from a Grand Lodge is very important, and keeping lodges doing things the right way and not slipping is also very important. And also checking out, make sure the finances are in order and all that kind of good stuff. Because mistakes happen, or people get a little lazy, and you gotta let slip how you should be doing things, and it's kind of good to have somebody there to kind of nudge you back into the correct path. Speaking of getting back to the correct path, so you had mentioned that there are 73 lodges left in Pennsylvania, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So a couple months ago on Facebook, I saw a post about a specific lodge that really, it just caught my eye because it seemed to be a completely radical change from how Grand Lodges normally do things with lodges that are in trouble. And I thought, wow, this is something that I really need to follow, and I need to see how this plays out. And so this is why we're here today. So can you explain a little bit of the situation with the Osage Lodge?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when it came time to visit these lodges, it wasn't really to bust knuckles and to make sure they're paying the right amount of dues and they're wearing the regalia and meeting correctly. A lot of it was about, you hear from the lodges all the time, they can't get people to join. So they finally get one or two people in and they get suspended a year or two later. Half the time it's because they're not meeting up in a lodge hall. They're sitting around and playing cards for a week or two. And that doesn't interest members. And in cases of lodges like this, they just become such a small lodge to where they don't do anything anymore. And they get a time where they don't know how to function anymore. They don't know how to bring in members. The communities and the areas build up around them, but they stay in the same four walls doing the same things for 150 years, and they don't change with the community. So when it comes time for them to take a step back and look and go, oh, geez, there's only 4 of us left and we're all in our 80s, we're in trouble. Let's just, give it up. Our building's shot, the roof is leaking. We're just going to throw it in. And that's kind of what happened here. You've seen pictures of what the building looked like. From the outside, it looked rough, but you walk inside, and out of all the lodges in the state, the Commonwealth, this was the most beautiful wooden, old-fashioned lodge I've ever seen. And I said, we just can't sit back and let it fall apart. We got to try something. And, the funny joke that they say about the Oddfellows is, how many Oddfellows does it take to change a light bulb? Nobody knows. It's a secret. We are a secret organization in ways, but so many people have held that secret to where it killed them. They practically suffocated themselves, and they didn't know what to do anymore. So they get frustrated. They just sit back and look at their ending numbers. I have a few lodges that, they went from 75 members, and then 5 years later, they're down to 25 because of the large amount of older people on their books. None of them were active anymore. They haven't been active in 30 years, but they see that bottom number dwindling, and all they do is sit, and they're in a horrible state of mind because they're losing members. But they're not worried about that 1 or 2 young guys that just joined. Yeah, we just got 2 young guys in, but we lost 14 members last year, and they wallow in that. And these other guys are going, well, we're willing to try something. You got to give us a chance. So the towns don't know what these lodges are capable of doing or what they've ever done. So when I decided, I want to try and get up there in Lehman Township is where Osage is, right outside of Wilkes-Barre. It was a small community, and everybody I called, I called the borough, and the first thing the lady said, she said, oh yeah, my grandfather was an Oddfellow there. Okay, well, why aren't you? So she transferred me to the borough, was a mayor or the president, and he said, yeah, my dad was an Oddfellow. Okay, why aren't you? It just kept going back to that. And I said, what can we do to get the word out? This lodge has been here for 150 years. In this May, it was here 150 years. She said, well, we have a board meeting every month, but 4 people show up and that's it. She said, if you really want to get out to the community, we have a Facebook page. And again, the building on the outside wasn't anything to write home about. But you look inside, And that's what catches your eye. I mean, you walk into some of these halls, and I've taken my wife up there. She walked in and her jaw dropped. She just, her eyes got real big. She's like, look at this place. The original oil lanterns are still on each side of Noble Grand and the Vice Grand station.
Wow.
I mean, it's walking back to the 1800s. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. The curtains were from the 70s. I said, we need to get rid of the curtains. So we went out to Walmart. We bought new curtains for the building for $110. We were good to go. You have to update some things, and she put these pictures on Facebook, and I worked with her in getting an article, letting her know who the charter members were, and I did a history of Lehman Township, and it popped up on like Google Documents. It's like, hold on, the kids of all the founders of the town started the lodge. This is really active, and I knew some of these names are still up there. I said, we got to follow up on this. So, that's kind of what we ended up doing. And as soon as she put that on Facebook, I mean, my phone started ringing off the hook. People were interested. And there was a father and son who joined. Well, the father joined in the 60s. The son joined in the 90s. And he said, it's funny, we were just talking about how the lodge used to be years ago and how it was a shame that it left because they were active in it, they were young, but they got chased out by the older guys. They wanted to do different things, and all the older members thought was, well, you're just trying to cause trouble. So they joined, and now they brought the son and the grandson, and now there's three generations in this lodge now. And we had a very mild winter, and when we set up this meeting, the furnace didn't work. It works, but it was unsafe to use at this time because it wasn't running in years. So the morning we did an open house, it was 22 degrees out, no heat in the building. So it was cold. So, and then of course a month later, COVID happens. So now I'm trying to make this happen in the middle of a pandemic. And it's like, okay, guys, just hold on. I know you're interested, but then a lot of the members who signed up, who were local truck drivers in that area, now they're getting a hold of me saying, hey, I'm going, ocean to ocean right now. Count me out until this calms down. And here we are in December, and it still hasn't calmed down. But then in July, we were able to get, I got some help from the lodges in that area. The whole Northeast kind of converged upon the state. We had about 20 people there, and we held an initiation. Now, this was July 29th. It was 95 degrees out. And then we sweated everything. So, but hey, it worked. Everybody was happy. And their only problem was this building. The roof was the original one, I think, and they had no money. Well, the lodges in Philadelphia, the lodges in Muncie and Spring City, across the area, they went together and donated to help put a new roof on Osage Lodge. And that made these guys feel happy. Hey, you guys were willing to help us out. This is really a viable organization. This is a great thing. Yeah, they're doing great. They have 7 members, and out of that, all of them are active. 7's a smaller number, but again, we have lodges in our state that have 50 members, but they get 7 out to a meeting. So 100% attendance, I'll take.
Well, there's a lot of great stuff that you touched on in that narrative. So I want to talk about a few of those items individually. The first one is something that I witnessed during my time going through the chairs here in Washington. Now, you, as a past Grand Master and current Grand Secretary, you looked at this lodge and you got active with helping them right before the end. So if you hadn't stepped in when you did, they probably would have been, maybe 6 months away from giving up the charter, and then the Grand Lodge has to come in, clean everything out, sell the building. That's kind of a big job, and Grand Lodges, although they deal with it, they're not really set up to be in the real estate business. We are set up for being in the Odd Fellowship business, and sometimes we have to dispose of assets that are left over from that process. But it's much better if you can come in earlier and say, hey, we don't need to sell the building because there are still members here. And this is something that, I've seen happen here in Washington. I've seen it happen in the neighboring jurisdictions. I got to give props to our peeps down in Oregon, because the Grand Lodge of Oregon does a really fantastic job of helping out and supporting their smaller lodges when they get into trouble. But part of that is you cannot have the culture of fear around a Grand Lodge. And I know that each one of us has witnessed this. Somebody says, well, we can't do that. We can't say anything. The Grand Lodge will come in, they'll pull our charter, and then we'll be all done. Well, okay, that's the way a lot of Grand Lodges used to work. The Grand Secretary would sit there just tapping his fingers maniacally, waiting for the phone to ring to find out about someone who had put the wrong number on a warrant for something, and go in and seizing the charter and selling the assets. You know, people really operated out of fear of a Grand Lodge, and so lodges would hide every problem from the Grand Lodge. Fortunately, we have jurisdictions now where that's no longer the case. We are doing pretty well here in Washington. Our lodges trust the Grand Lodge really well now. And partially that's because we also have a really wonderful Grand Secretary who communicates regularly and makes sure that she finds out what their needs are and tries to anticipate helping them out. So that has really built a lot of trust. And I give a lot of credit to our Grand Secretary for having done that. Because with the pandemic, we have some lodges that still have bills, but now they have no income because they can't rent their hall out for meetings and parties and events. So the rental income has gone away. And so the Grand Lodge is offering them a little bit of financial help to continue with that. So what kind of a shift have you seen in Pennsylvania that has allowed you to be able to go in and give the lodges the kind of help that they need to sustain themselves?
It did seem back in the early 80s, 90s. Well, everybody knows when things started collapsing. You know, shortly after World War II, the members started dying off. They realized we don't have an identity anymore. And all these old World War II veterans started going through the chairs. And they're very hard. You know, they're very harsh on people. And if it's not done right, and if you don't have this memorized, and if you, like you said, Toby, if you don't do all this stuff, you're going to get a tongue lashing. And the members didn't want to hear it. And it's here in Pennsylvania, I saw the fear. It wasn't fear. It was frustration and resentment. And I had one lodge consolidate during my time. And it still bothers me that I lost it because it was the last lodge in Franklin County, which is down near Chambersburg. So, you know, I talked to these guys, you know, I set up a meeting and they called me. We were out and staying at a hotel in Johnstown. They called me. They said, we're not going to have a quorum. I said, well, I want to come and I just want to meet you guys. I want to see the hall. I want to talk to you. And we did. We sat around, we talked. I looked at the hall. It was beautiful. They said, you know, you're Grand Lodge, but you're not like the rest of them. I said, this is Grand Lodge, you know, and I told them, I said, now this is how Grand Lodge is now. We're all the same people. I'm the same person from a small lodge in Tamaqua, just like he is down in Upper Strasburg. And I said, you know, there's no reason we can't make things work. But, you know, they had this resentment towards the Grand Lodge because he said, you know, we wear button-up shirt and pants to our meetings. But, you know, Grand Master back in the early 2000s, late 90s came in with his tuxedo, with his badge, pounding his hand on the podium, talking about membership. Why aren't you guys out there recruiting? Why aren't you doing more? They get frustrated. They get bent out of shape and they say, you know what? And they just throw their hands up. And they just run an autopilot until enough of them die off to where they say, okay, we spend enough money, let's close up. You know, and that's, unfortunately, we couldn't save them. Their mind was already made up by then. But we've been doing a lot to show people that I'm not Grand Lodge. I'm another member just like everybody else is here. And we need to act like that. We can't hide behind ranks. We can't hide behind, you know, money. We got to work together because if we don't keep our lodges going, we're not going to be around. We're going to consolidate ourselves out of a job, out of existence.
That's right. Now, another thing that came up in that story about the Osage Lodge, you walked into a situation where you had a small lodge in an old building, and this is going to be familiar to members all over the country. They didn't have money to fix the roof. There's a similar story to that, which I'll share from the jurisdiction of Idaho. Now, Idaho is a kind of an interesting state because it's skinny at the top and really big at the bottom. And it's really, really difficult to go from northern Idaho to southern Idaho because of the geography with the mountains and everything. You cannot easily get from southern Idaho up to northern Idaho. You know, northern Idaho is basically an extension of eastern Washington in a way. So because of this, it's easy for the lodges in northern Idaho to hide. It's easy for a Grand Master who may be in the southeast corner of the state to say, I'm not going to drive 9 hours just so I can go visit the lodge in Priest River, Idaho. It's too much to be able to do. You know, it's essentially it's a 2-day trip at the minimum. So they had a lodge in the town of Orofino. 10 years ago, they were starting to have trouble with the roof leaking in Orofino, but they didn't want to contact the Grand Lodge. They didn't want to make waves. They didn't want to have any problems. They didn't want to draw attention to themselves that might somehow result in negative activity. So the Lodge Hall in Orofino, Idaho, which is a tiny town in the mountains, it was built between 2 other buildings. But the other buildings on either side of it did not have their own exterior walls because they're right next to the lodge hall. So they used the lodge's exterior walls as their exterior walls. By the time it got to the point where the lodge hall was literally starting to fall down because the roof trusses were weakening under, you know, the heavy winter snow they get every year, and it's starting to twist and turn. And so finally Grand Lodge found out about this, sent a structural engineer up to Orofino and said, what can be done about this now, 10 years after something should have happened? The structural engineer said, oh, you've got a terrible situation on your hands here. If you had dealt with this long ago, we could have put a new roof on it. But as it stands now, it's going to cost $500,000 to demolish this building because the buildings on either side do not have their own exterior walls. So you can't just knock down this building in the middle. You would leave 2 adjacent buildings with no exterior walls. This is going to be an incredibly difficult and expensive problem. And of course, at that point, the Grand Lodge of Idaho, which doesn't really have that much of a budget, they do help lodges out with expenses when it comes to the building. They said there's nothing we can do. We literally have to walk away from it and not do any more with this because you let it go too long. You let it decay to the point that it's beyond redemption.
We've had a similar situation, almost the opposite though, Smethport. When I was Grand Guardian, we went up there, and this is up in McKean County, up by Lake Erie. And again, they're another one. Yeah, Grand Lodge is down there. We're up in our own little area up in the Northwest, you know, we're by ourselves. So we came up there because we knew they were having problems, and they have this huge lodge hall, and there's fireplaces in it. I mean, it was enormous, but it was one of 3 buildings. It was in the middle, and the one on the right was falling down. So as we walked up there, the Grand Master at that time walked up to Noble Grand's station and stuck his hand outside through the wall because this building was pulling the whole wall away. And it's like, why did you guys not do anything about this? Why did you not tell us? So they were fortunate enough to sell it. They sold it for about $25,000, and they now meet in another hall. But then the people who bought it revitalized it, and it's beautiful now. I said, well, see if you can get back in up there, you know, just to get yourselves back home. But yeah, the lodges they've been left alone for so long. And in some of these little pockets, it's like, well, nobody cares. We'll just do our thing. And nuts to you, you know? And that's kind of the mind frame of some of these people. And now we're at the point where we're small enough to, if we can't personally see what's going on, we need to make sure we have at least good district deputies or good people in that area that can handle what's around them, to make sure that somebody's checking up on these lodges every couple years. And, you know, if the Grand Master now can't visit all the lodges, at least let the next person know, hey, these are the ones I missed. There's no reason in 5-year time, each lodge in any state shouldn't be visited at least once.
Now, do you have regular district deputy meetings in Pennsylvania?
Prior to all this, yes. We did have a Zoom meeting recently, and we're going to have one coming up again, which is better because we do have a lot of younger district deputies that can't make it out to Harrisburg for a meeting. We've been doing them in conjunctions with rallies and encouraging district deputies to come out to them. But again, we have a lot of them that work out in the area. So at least this way they can come in, and if they have a problem with a lodge, hey, this is our problem, what can we do? And they've started networking too, and it's been working out very well. We have 21 or 22 districts in the state, and only one district has one lodge. We try and keep not so that, and that's the problem, like you were saying up in Idaho, you know, you have one lodge up there, well, they're district deputies probably from that lodge because nobody else wants to travel up there. So essentially, nobody's really looking after them. They're looking after themselves and seeing it fall apart. So if you have a lodge that's by itself like we do, we have a person from a neighboring district fill in as district deputy. So somebody from the outside is coming in and checking up on it.
Oh, that sounds like a very, very good idea. Because one thing, you will probably validate this experience of mine. There is nothing when you're the Grand Master that is like actually getting out, meeting face to face, talking to the lodges and finding out what's going on. That's really how you can assess their condition and what they need. And then you can really advocate for that lodge and help them out and help them to be strong and successful. Because when we have successful lodges, we have a successful Grand Lodge.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, a lot of what's gone on is the neglect of our Grand Lodges for not working with these lodges and helping them out when they see that things are getting bad. And they can say, well, we didn't know they were getting bad, because nobody checked up on these people. Again, working at the office, I had a good opportunity. When I would visit a lodge I knew that didn't get members out but had a large membership, I wrote to every member of that lodge that I was coming to visit, and if you needed a ride, I would pick you up. Well, I came to a lodge, and there's this guy sitting there, and he came from a consolidation in 2002. He said, I am here because I've been an odd fellow for a long time, and this is the first time I've been written to by a lodge or by anybody since the consolidation 11 years ago. And he showed up, you know, and that was great. The lodge members were introducing themselves to him, and he's been a member all this time. You know, these people, wow. We have a lot of members who just feel like they've been let go, you know, and you got to reach out a little bit and let them know you're still here.
That's really good advice. Earlier, you had mentioned about the all-time, probably one of the biggest issues that we do face is a lodge does get some younger members in, and then they immediately get run off. And this will be probably an issue that we all deal with as members until we're old and die ourselves. So how do you guys handle that in your jurisdiction? The idea of older members being more resistant to change and being afraid to take kind of stick their necks out and risk doing something. For example, like with Osage having a very open public community effort happen to, which I feel like many jurisdictions would feel like that was almost shameful, but I think that it's a very brave thing to show that vulnerability and say, hey, we need your help, community. Do you guys have a specific system in place or kind of a way to handle the issues that do come up of butting heads of the old guard and the new?
Well, in Osage's case, by the time we stepped in, the old guard was either had either died off or in nursing homes at this point. And actually, like I said, the members that reinstated, the younger guys, they left in 2000 already. So they came back, but they didn't realize what has been going on all this time. They didn't realize that it was just slowly continuing to dwindle. Out of the 7 people we have, none of them were the original 8 or 9 that were still in the lodge when they went defunct. They, like I said, they get frustrated to the point where they just throw in the towel. So they said, you know what, if you want it, take it. You know, when you have a computer that messes up, you can restart it, you can refresh it, but sometimes you got to pull the plug out of the wall completely, let it sit for a couple months, and then plug it back in. Hard reset. And that's what we did here. That's what we did up in Warren, Pennsylvania. Warren had, oh God, they were up to about 13 or 14 members. But again, we can't bring in any members. There's no enthusiasm in the community. So we shut them. They closed up. They couldn't get any officers. They went defunct. And that's what Grand Lodge does. As soon as a building goes defunct, let's sell it, get out from underneath it, and move on. Well, I said, hold on. Let's give it a second. See if there's any interest in this community. It's not their lodge. It is not my lodge. It is the community's lodge. So you need to let the community know, hey, you're getting rid of something that has been in this area since the beginning of your community. And they got to realize that this has been there, and as the community grew, so did the lodge, and there was a direct correlation there. And there's no surprise as the lodge shrank, the community fell into the kind of funk, you know, and we see that all the time. So we have to let the community know, and nobody's ever known.
So you mentioned another lodge. So how many times have you tried this method of opening up to the community and publicly kind of doing that open house situation where you go on Facebook on the community page for that town or the township there and get like a little local newspaper article and things like that? So you've done this a couple times now?
Actually, it's been 3 times since I've been involved. The first one, when I was Grand Master, there was a lodge in Indiana, Pennsylvania, Alert 936. They were down to 7 members on their books, and their secretary and treasurer died within like 3 months of each other.
Ooh, that makes it tough.
Yeah, and their noble grand resigned. So literally, we're sitting here going, okay, we're done. You know, so let's see what we can do. So I wrote to the remaining 5 or 6 members, and I said, I'm going to come up anyhow. I want to see if there's any interest here. This town is so small, it doesn't even have a stop sign. It is just one little street, and the lodge hall is a 2-story building, and they have a decent rental. They have the post office on the 1st floor.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so 2 guys showed up, and the one guy came in. He said, I haven't been in here for 40 years, but he said, I'm willing to give it a try. Well, I said, can you talk to some people? Because it's a very small farming community. Yeah, sure. And he did. He brought in a couple people who were in the 60s and dropped out when they were young and life got too busy for them. I'll get back around to it. So then they realized, okay, hey, we're losing it here, guys. So they brought in 8 or 9 people. Today they have 16 members, and they're meeting regularly. They're helping the community. They're making it work again. Warren was the same way. Warren Lodge, they all quit, but one of the neighboring lodges, the guy's brother or cousin, worked literally across the street from the lodge. And he said, hey, let's see if I can talk to some of my friends and my counterparts in the community and see what we can do. Well, they're up to 16 people. And out of those 16, only one of them is originally from that lodge. The other ones are all brand new right off the streets, just because 1 or 2 people went out in their community and let them know, hey, I'm having fun doing this. This is a cool organization. Why don't you join? We can advertise, but for the most part, talk if you're local. Talk to your friends and family. If you can get your friends and family in, your friends are your friends because they share common interests with you. So if I like doing something like this and I like hanging out with my friends, I'm going to say, hey, give this a try. Come out a couple nights and see what you can do.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that a guy, his cousin worked across the street from the lodge, so he talked him into joining, because that kind of situational awareness is so lost on so many lodges. Now, you mentioned going to Indiana, Pennsylvania, which it fascinates me that you have towns named after other states there in Pennsylvania. I guess there are only so many town names when you've got a state as populous as Pennsylvania. You just don't want to keep repeating Lycoming over and over again. But you describe the 2-story building in town, the lodge. I had that exact same experience here in Washington. It's a little farm town in South Central Washington, Bickleton. They have a lodge, Excelsior 111. It's been there since probably the 1880s, I want to say. No, late 1890s, because 111 would put them in the 1890s. So it's the only 2-story building in town, and they are the hub of any activity that happens in Bickleton. So if there's anything, if there's a wedding, if there's a funeral, if there's an event of any kind in Bickleton, the Oddfellows are involved in that. And that idea of the lodge being central to the community, that is what sustains that lodge. There are probably about 200 people in the town of Bickleton. 20 of them belong to the Oddfellows Lodge. They also have a similarly active Rebecca Lodge. So you think about that, 10% of the town are members of that lodge. And when you have that kind of activity where everybody is together and being a part of the community means you are active in the lodge, that is what makes lodges successful. That also brings up another thing that I'm hearing sort of come back as a theme in what you're telling us here. And that is that with a little bit of outside perspective, you in the Grand Lodge, either as Grand Master or Grand Secretary, you can go to a lodge, look at a situation and say, hey, did you try talking to the people at the general store over there? Did you try talking to the people at the dentist's office? Did you try talking to the town council on open meeting night when they have an open order of business and anyone can get up and talk to the town council? You're really bringing a lot of these ideas in that lodges probably forgot about long, long ago. One of our very dear and beloved past grandmasters here in Washington, Edmund L. Wrighton Jr., he told me the story of when he first joined the lodge in the 1950s. On Sunday mornings, they would dress up in their best suits, put on their regalia, and they would visit different churches for their church services and give a special offering at that church in their Oddfellows regalia, where they would come in and be this very sort of impressive part of the community, this very impressive presentation of fellowship in front of that congregation. And I think about that quite often because that is such a brilliant idea. You know, going to churches and going to the town council meetings and going to the local fire hall and going to all of those sort of community places, going to the local high school, to the PTA, doing those things as a lodge where you have visibility. In this day and age, it probably wouldn't be wearing the regalia so much as it would be putting on a lodge t-shirt, but going out and showing yourself in that community, that seems to be a skill that a lot of lodges have let atrophy or just completely die off.
Absolutely. And when Letterkenny Lodge consolidated, the lodge in Franklin County, I went through their books because I wanted to see what went wrong, what happened that they started falling apart. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not the community, it's the lodges. What changed? Exactly what you said they were doing. They were visiting churches once a month. but they were working together with the 7 or 8 lodges in their county. So this time they would go visit a lodge in one town, and then the whole district would go. So it wouldn't be 10 people from this lodge. It was 80 people, 10 people from each lodge. And then the next week they go to this church, and they visited. They did things, but then over the years, and I saw it in their minutes. This lodge consolidated, that lodge consolidated, this lodge consolidated, this one closed down. Now they're sitting by themselves. They have no more socialization. They have no more fraternity. They have completely locked themselves off. There's no more lodges in this county, and then they eventually fade away. Consolidations at one point seemed like a good idea, but that is one of those stick in my cross so much because there's nothing good about them. When you lose a lodge in that community, the consolidation doesn't help. Why don't we put a little more effort into trying to keep those lodges going than just letting them consolidate? But the problem is if those members want it and they fight enough about it, it's hard for us to say no. Even now, there's a lodge, last lodge in Erie County, 269,000 people in this county, and they don't have 5 people interested in keeping it going. So I found 2 and a current member. And the guy, he belongs to another organization. He says, I could get members, but we're not meeting now because of the pandemic. We can keep this lodge going. But the members want to consolidate because 1 or 2 people who are holding the reins are up there in age and they just they don't want to deal with it anymore. So they let it go. But it's not your lodge to decide. This lodge has been in this community since actually next month. They instituted January of 1886. We just can't let that go without trying to see if we can keep this lodge going in this area. And with finding at least 3 people in the midst of a pandemic, that's a start. And these guys are sure they can pick up a few more. So we got to keep trying. We got to be a little more creative. That's why we get paid more, because we're supposed to be more creative. And that's at least what I keep telling them. So, and they keep paying me. So until then, I guess I'll just keep trying to come up with new ideas.
I was gonna say, like, that's a really a good point that you made about, being in a populated area and just throwing up their hands and saying, that they're gonna give up the ghost with it. And I think a lot of lodges that it's been a very small group of core members for decades probably, and they've been slowly dying off. They get a little too possessive over the lodge, and they forget that, like you had mentioned, this is the community's lodge. This is everybody's lodge. And that lodge has been there long before we have, and we are just stewards of it. And it should be our goal to have that lodge last longer than we do. I know, like, with my personal situation with the lodge, it's kind of a weird situation, being that, like, I own the building that the lodge is in. And so I'm going to, make sure with my paperwork and everything that it is insured in the papers, on paper, that my lodge, after I die and somebody else has hold of this building, if this lodge lasts longer than me, I want to make sure that this lodge always has a home here, because that's what this building was built for. And even though the lodge doesn't own the building anymore, like it used to once upon a time, I want to ensure that whoever takes over after me of the building owner, that they don't kick the lodge out and just so they could rent that space to do something else with. And we need to ensure that these lodges last longer than us, instead of just taking whatever money is left in the account and taking your death benefit preemptively, or having a big party or whatever you hear the crazy stories of, and then calling Grand Lodge and saying, hey, we voted to, hand in our charter, here it is, here's your cut of the money, and we're done. So here's the keys. Bye.
Yeah, and we've seen that too, where lodges, they spend all their money, and then a new group gets it and goes, well, where'd all the money go? Oh, well, the last people just blew it all before you inherited it. But that's what, as soon as I started getting active, I started bringing my son around too. And there's a Rebecca meeting and me and my wife are both at Rebecca's, he's out in the anteroom. But he goes to session with us, and he knows these people too. And he would get nervous around people he didn't know, but I'd say, it's okay, they're an odd fellow. Well, then he would, okay, well, they're an odd fellow. I know they're all right. And these older people, they love him too. And, he can't wait till he turns 16 and gets to join. And so many members kept their kids away because that was their time away from their family. You stay home, I'm going out and playing pinochle and having a few beers. That's great and everything, but then their kid turns 16 and they're mad because the kid don't want to join. Well, you don't want to be an organization that took your family away from you. We're supposed to be a family-oriented organization. So I'm hoping my son will join, and I'm hoping when I'm gone, he will carry on what I have, what my father has, what my ancestors have, because it's just too important to just see fall by the wayside.
Well, I think this is a perfect opportunity to take a quick break and listen to a word from our sponsor. We'll be back shortly with some more wisdom from Justin Bailey, Grand Secretary and past Grand Master of Pennsylvania, right after this.
This is an actor portrayal. Hi, I'm Amanda, the brains and brawn behind Pig and a Pug, where I use only the best materials to give you the best products possible. For those that don't know, I'm based in the beautiful mountains of Montana, and right now it's very cold outside, so this is the perfect opportunity to give you guys a little bit of a news update. I just wanted to take a quick second to announce the upcoming release of our Christmas-themed soaps that will be shipping the first week of December. These will make fantastic gifts for those you love. With 6 different custom-tailored scents, there will be something for everyone. Know any Harry Potter fans? We have a selection of soaps for both kids and adults that will be shipping this coming week. We are also planning some Harry Potter-related giveaways for the launch, so make sure you get involved. We also have a variety of 8-ounce scented candles, sugar scrubs, and bath bombs. If this sounds up your or someone you know's alley, look us up on Facebook and on Etsy. Just search Pig and a Pug. Did you get that? Pig and a Pug. Also, as a special thank you for your support, we are offering all listeners of the Three Links Oddcast a special coupon code for 24% off your order. Just use the code THANKYOU24 at checkout. And I'll say it again, Pig and a Pug.
And we're back here on the Three Links Oddcast. Sergio is taking the night off. We have him on assignment to our material science division here at the Oddcast. So Ainsley and I are talking with Brother Justin Bailey of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. And it's time for the shout out. Woohoo! All of our regular listeners know that the shout out is where we take an opportunity to highlight great things that are happening in the world of Odd Fellowship. And this episode's shout out goes to the jurisdiction of Wyoming, specifically Riverton Lodge number 44. I know that we have a very dedicated listener, Brother Braden Harvey, who belongs to Riverton 44. And he told us all about the great things they're doing in Riverton, Wyoming with their lodge. A lot of great activities within the community. They've had to kind of scale it back during the pandemic, but they're still out there working hard, raising money, doing a lot of great things. But there are 2 things that really stand out. Number one, Brother Braden is working very hard to get a new lodge going in his hometown of Thermopolis. And he's got some people together. They're working on getting that. Hopefully he'll check in with us here soon. Let us know how progress is going on getting the new lodge in Thermopolis. And he has received some fantastic support from the Grand Lodge of Wyoming. This is wonderful. One of the best things that a Grand Lodge can do is get behind any effort to build and repair Odd Fellowship. Grand Lodges are not just there to preside over the downfall and decay. they can be agents of rebuilding. So we want to salute the Grand Lodge of Wyoming. And also, for those of you who are on the internet, the Grand Lodge of Wyoming has a new website. So we want to make sure and highlight that, because in this day and age, the path to new members is making it possible for them to join. That means making sure they can get access to information. So the one place that everybody goes to get information about something is the internet. Make sure that your Grand Lodge, like Wyoming, has a website. It is a very, very important resource for getting new members, and even for current members who are like, yeah, there's that lodge on the other side of the state. What night do they meet? I'm traveling there and I might just drop in. That is an important resource to have for your current members. So make sure, if your jurisdiction does not have a website, reach out to someone in the order, talk to Sovereign Grand Lodge. They can get you in touch with someone who can help you out. I know that there are still some jurisdictions that don't have a web presence, and there's almost nothing that's going to help you to be able to attract new members and grow like putting up a website and letting people know that you're out there and you exist. So the shout out goes to Riverton 44 in Wyoming, and also sort of coincidentally to the entire Grand Lodge of Wyoming for just doing some great stuff in your jurisdiction.
I think over half of our jurisdictions currently do not have a website, which I think is a very sad thing. It's not a super probably well-known thing, but the Sovereign Grand Lodge every year does pay for jurisdictional custom URLs that can be used for a domain for the jurisdictions. If your Grand Lodge does not have a website, all you have to do is get a hold of Sovereign. You could either call Terry or probably get a hold of me, and I'll get a hold of somebody else on the communications committee besides me, because I don't have the logins. But we do have domain names that we've been paying for everybody to use, even though a lot of jurisdictions opt to choose their own domain name. They are there for the using, and then you could just get a really easy template-based website like a WordPress, and you could, in an evening, you could throw together, if you could write an email, you could throw together a very basic website. And there's a lot of great videos on how to do it. And if you have questions, anybody could either get a hold of me on Facebook, because for those who don't know, I am the webmaster for the Sovereign Grand Lodge. I built the website that everybody visits, IOOF.org right now. And that website usually gets about 500 hits a day.
500
That is about
hits.
an average. Yeah. You really need to get your jurisdiction online, and it's easy to do. At minimum, just start a Facebook page, because that'll start getting you on the Google index if you have a Facebook page even. So if anybody has any questions about any of that sort of web stuff, there's me, and there's like probably a small army of other guys I could probably point you to get help with that stuff. But as a small aside, yes, please get a website.
Now, just think about that. 500 hits a day. Imagine if just 5% of those were people looking to join and ready to fill out applications. That's 25 people a day. Imagine how quickly a jurisdiction could grow with 25 people a day who want to know more about the Oddfellows. Just think about that. You know, even if that's 25 a day for all of North America, you know, just looking at the US, that would be one person for every 2 states. Yeah. You know, that is a really amazing potential for growth right there, just tapping into the interest that is out there looking to find us through the internet.
And when I'm saying we get 500 hits a day, I'm talking like unique visitors, not just page clicks. So right now I've got the stats pulled up for the Sovereign website. Today we had 663 visitors, but we had 1,227 page views. So those visitors visited about 4 pages, before they left the website. So they are staying and they're clicking. The main things they're clicking on are obviously the home one, and then who are we, and then lodges near you, our mission, what we do, how to join. These are things that people are looking at every single day, wanting to know how to find the closest lodge, what we do, where we're at. And most of the hits do come from the United States. Then Canada follows behind. But just know the web is not going away anywhere. You gotta get your Grand Lodge on it with a lodge directory with information on where those lodges are located, what night they meet, a phone number and an email address for those people to contact, and then make sure somebody actually answers the email on the other end of that line, because that is the most important thing to do, is to respond, because people are asking. They just need somebody to answer that message. And that's my little rant for the evening.
That's a good rant. You can't repeat that message too many times, because if doing this podcast has taught me nothing else, it's that there are people who really, really, really are trying to join the Oddfellows, but they cannot always figure out how to do it. The easier we make that process, the easier we make it for random people who are looking for us to find us, the better we will do at getting members in our lodges. So with that said, let's get back to our special guest here, Brother Justin Bailey from the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Now, before the break, I believe you were about to ask him about if there's a plan for how to save lodges, or whether he just kind of improvises his plan when he finds out a lodge is in trouble.
Yeah, so I saw that you had that map that you had posted on the Grand Lodge of PA Facebook with which counties in Pennsylvania currently have lodges and which counties don't have lodges. That seems like a phase 2 part of your plan. So phase 1 seems to be save the lodges that are still there but struggling. And then phase 2 seems to be reinstituting lodges in counties where there are no lodges. Am I correct in that assertion?
Sort of. It depends on how things kind of fall. When you work so hard, like we've been working with Warren and Osage to save them, and then another lodge you didn't expect to see starting to fall starts to slip again. Fortunately for me, I have a 90-mile commute one way to work every day. So I'm in the car 3 hours round trip every day. And it gives me a lot of time to think and to listen to podcasts. And it does help me out trying to figure out a plan forward. And it is something that you kind of have to cater to whatever the situation is, whether you're in a city, whether you're in a country, if there's people around that can help you or not, if there's outside things going in, if the lodge has a building or not. If they have a building, hey, this could be yours. But if they're meeting in a church basement, it gets a little harder to try and throw a pitch there, Unfortunately, our history, and we get this all the time, and I know you've been dying too with the presidential information, how comes these jurisdictions don't have any information? Well, we had a beautiful Grand Lodge office next to the Susquehanna River in Harrisburg, which was wonderful until Hurricane Agnes hit. And we lost our history. We lost everything prior to 1972. So we're building it up again. But just this morning, I got an email, hey, my great-grandfather was a member in Philadelphia back in the 1800s. What can you tell me? Well, I can tell you there were 250 lodges in Philadelphia during the 1800s, and there's 4 left, and that's kind of where it falls. So right now we are trying, any lodge that has under 10 members, we really need to start getting them to look at where they are. When I went out of office, we did not have any lodges with under 10 members. Now we're back down to where we have about 3 or 4. The one lodge was actually I started working with when I became district deputy before everything, was Shenandoah 591, or Chendo as they call it. They tried driving their charter down to the Grand Lodge office to turn it in. And they haven't met for 30 years. And the Grand Lodge knows it, but they have not 1, but 2 cemeteries. So we don't want them. So I said, hold on, guys, because I'm in Tamaqua, they're in Shenandoah. 20 minutes away. Let me come up. So they had 5 members on the books. The youngest guy was 60, and the other guys were in their 80s. So I joined as an associate. They can get 4 out. I joined as an associate to make them 5, and we moved everything around to where they can start holding an actual meeting again. These 4 guys sung louder than any other lodge I've ever been in. It was horrible. They were so off tune, but they were just so happy to be singing again. And I just sat back and I thought, hey, this is something. They care, and it meant the world that they found somebody who could care. So their 5th member said, I can't come out to meetings, but I talked my grandson into joining. So he got his grandson to join, and then he started coming out to meetings too. So now we're getting 7 out to a meeting, and we really started building it up again. So it just depends on the demographics. It depends on who's around there. But if you can get somebody from outside of the area to come in there and say, hey guys, we care, let's make this work. We can do it. Now, subsequently though, I've been talking to some people who say, I have a lodge, I want to join a lodge in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Well, there's no lodge left. But I always put, at the end, if you want to start one, let me know. Well, what's it take to start one? So now we're actually having some areas in the state where there's starting to be interest. And I thought, well, hey, strike while the iron's hot. These people are sitting at home bored. They're researching what the Odd Fellows are, and they want to make a go with it. Hey, I know now's not the greatest time, but if they want to do it, hey, we got to make it happen, because there's no reason we should let it go by,
I think if you could get that a Monroe County lodge back, even if it's not Stroudsburg or Eastburg, I like you said, I would definitely have to come out for that, because I would feel definitely personally invested in that. So it does seem you have to kind of custom tailor your approach with each lodge you're trying to help. Is there maybe a way that you can, I don't know, even if you're willing, that, would be if you could maybe write up almost like an action plan that could then be emailed or shipped to every Grand Lodge for the Grand Secretary to then look at and throw in the trash. Hopefully not. But
you mean for the Grand Secretary to look at and put into action?
Absolutely. I feel like there's a way that this could be mobilized and used, so each jurisdiction could put their own touch on it, because every jurisdiction is different and there is no blanket solution to anybody's problem, contrary to what some people do believe in the organization. I do believe that our geography does create a lot of differences in how you got to approach people. I'm originally from the East Coast, and the way I approach people on the East Coast and talk to them is radically different from how I approach and talk to people here in the Midwest. That being said, I do feel like, you've got something there, and if there's a way to kind of make almost like a template that can be followed and kind of filled in to meet the needs of that particular region, something like that, I don't know if there's an official method to do it, or if it would have to come from sovereign or anything, or just kind of grassroots, just do it ourselves. But to get this concept out there of, hey, your lodge is failing, here is your how to save your lodge before it's too late, or even if it is too late, it's never too late until the charter's off the wall method.
Yeah, absolutely. And even then, with Alert, Warren, and Osage, we did pull the charter off the wall. When a lodge goes defunct, you have 3 years to revitalize it, and then we give everything back, Hey, that's what I told the board. Just give me some time and let's see what we can do. Let's not just try and sell it and move on. Every lodge, I always said, is essentially a living, breathing thing. It's not the people, it's the charter, it's the history, it's the books, it's the community. And there's no reason I couldn't come up with some sort of template. I did have a past Grand Master from Illinois call me, because he has 3 lodges in his area that are about ready to go on.
I know exactly
and
who and what you're talking about right now, and that's why I was wanting this because I have that. I didn't realize there was 3 of them, unfortunately, but I did have that one particular lodge in mind for that, exactly what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I felt bad because I wasn't expecting it, and I just started rambling for about 20 minutes. So the guy's probably has no clue. He probably thinks I'm insane, which I might be, but
Was it Jim?
hopefully he got something out of it. Yes, yes, it was. And but I gave him some good pointers, and he seemed to have liked what I said. And I'm pretty sure we can get that. I can put that in some kind of form to where Grand Lodges or even neighboring areas can start going in and revitalizing it. We did a lot of work with the department council, and I won't get into cantons too much because I know you haven't gotten into that. But when I started getting active in that, we had 4 cantons left in Pennsylvania, and out of that, 2 of them were kind of shaky. We're up to 8 of them now, and
Oh, wow.
within less than 10 years, we went from we had about 45 members to now we're over 100.
Oh, wow.
And it was just letting the people know what was there, letting the lodges see what we do, and start. You know, my emblem and my program back then was Renaissance, progress, rebirth, pride, and you know that rebirth, the match, that flame. If you can find one person, that's all it takes. It doesn't take going out and signing up 40 new members. It takes signing up one person who really says, hey, this is good, you know, and every community has that one person somewhere. You just got to find them. I mean, you look at the old journals, it's like, hey, they just started a community here of 80 people. We put a lodge here. Well, if a community of 80 can have it, you know, you put that to today's numbers. I mean, we had 1,500 lodges at one time in Pennsylvania. We can essentially have 1,500 again. I don't think I'll ever see it, but anything's possible if we really put the efforts forward and come up with a good plan and execute it.
And making sure the quality is there, that is a long-term quality product that people do want to invest in and stick around for, because you don't want to have that situation where you do all this work and then somebody in that chain doesn't hold up their end of the deal, and then you do get new people in, and then they show up to the meetings and they're like, what the heck is this? This is not what I thought it was. This is horrible. And then they never come back.
Absolutely. And like with Osage, we have a very good district deputy up in that area, Tom McHugh. He's a past Grand Master. He's in charge of our website here in Pennsylvania. He's their district deputy. So, and he seems motivated by everything that happened. His son actually now is Noble Grand of Thistle, 512 in Pittston. And he came up to help us out in the degree work too. And he's going to get motivated too because of it. He's going to work with this lodge and get them motivated. I mean, it's like I said, with the match, fire, it spreads, and it's going to start spreading. And if it catches on, I mean, it can really take off. But we got to follow up on it and make sure they're learning. Check in every couple months, make sure they're comfortable with what they're doing the ritual, get them somewhat accustomed to degree work. When you do put on degrees, you know, they can really easily turn into a joke. I've seen it before, and I've seen a lot of members turned off because of it. And we had a rally in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and we were getting 150 out to it. It was great. And we did the degrees good because that's what they wanted to see. They had that wow factor, and that's what we need in our area, this wow factor. We had a lodge in Lewisburg. They were about ready to go defunct. They were down to 11 members. They were meeting in a church, a very small room. They had a table that they sat around, and they had a filing cabinet. Well, they really went out on a limb. They asked us for a very large amount of money, and they purchased an old Victorian house and a 3-story barn. And they have been revitalizing this barn, and they've started a degree team. They've brought in members. They've kind of made the initiation a high-tech thing with some different. It's really neat. And it was a kind of 1 or 2 people who came in there and said, hey, this is a great thing. We got to capitalize off of it. And they're doing well. They're up to about 20 members. They're all young. They're active. They're in the community. And it takes 1 or 2 people to get it going. And it can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's in the desert or in New York City, you know?
I said, if anybody wants to read about what he was just speaking of with the Lewisburg Lodge, there are several articles written by Scott Robinson
Yep.
on the Heart and Hand blog about exactly that. showing how they were able to high-techify their initiations and make some rig up some new hoodwinks, etc., with pictures and everything to kind of give you visual aids. If you go to oddfellowsguide.com, you could go over onto the little menu there, click on Scott Robinson, and that will pull up those articles about what that particular lodge is doing. And they're doing some really neat kind of outside the box things that I think are going to secure the life of that lodge for many years to come.
Yeah, I think it also shows something else, and that is that the process of saving the lodge, if you step back from it, you go, oh my gosh, this is so huge. I don't know that this is possible. Let's just throw our hands up. And I know that I've seen, just in my time in the order, there was a time when the Grand Lodge of Washington really didn't want to get involved so much helping out individual lodges. The Grand Lodge would sit back and say, well, you know the rules, either follow them or turn in your charter and we'll sell your stuff. And while there's nothing wrong with that approach organizationally, because it follows the rules, I think in a way it did not uphold the spirit of Odd Fellowship, because at one point Odd Fellowship sold itself. You had to be a part of some kind of shared mutual benefit organization, just because we didn't have government services, social programs and things like that. So you had to belong to something through your church, something through an ethnic organization, something through a professional organization, or something through a lodge like the Odd Fellows. So it used to be self-evident why you had to join. But that state of self-evidence is no longer the case. And when I think about it, Thomas Wildey could have said, yeah, Washington Lodge number 1, we've got a lodge in Baltimore. This is fine. This is all we need to do. There's no need to spread it. No need to go north into Pennsylvania and start lodges up there. No need to go south into Virginia and start lodges there. Baltimore is enough. That's good enough. Everybody come to lodge on Tuesday nights. But no, Thomas Wildey did not do that. He said, gosh darn it, this is the best thing that has ever happened to fraternalism, and I'm going to spread it everywhere I can. I'm going to make sure that every town in what was then America got a lodge. And when you look at how early Odd Fellowship had spread, like what was the lodge in Wisconsin? Mineral Point number 1, or Iowa number 1 I think it was Iowa number 1 in Mineral Point. That was what, the 1830s? So
yes, that was what he went up the Mississippi, right? And then because that's what he instituted Western Star number 1 in Alton, Illinois, and I think he went down to like New Orleans at one point on that journey in 1836, I think it was. And he literally, Johnny Appleseed style, went through on several occasions through the then United States and some of the territories, evangelizing Odd Fellowship and getting lodges going, and literally writing on scraps of paper, chartering from the Grand Lodge of the United States, granting charters to Grand Lodges that places that weren't even states yet.
Yeah, and I look at that and I think, okay, 1819, he got the first lodge off the ground. Well, that would be enough of an accomplishment just for me. But then within 20 years, by 1839, there were lodges as far west as the Mississippi. And give it another 20 years, there are lodges all the way on the Pacific coast. That's when Chemeketa number 1 in Oregon, I think that was 1854. Olympia number 1 here in Washington is 1855. And there's Excelsior number 1 in Honolulu that got their charter before anybody on the West Coast because the ship got blown off course. Odd Fellowship spread so quickly because it wasn't just something that people knew they wanted. There were people actively advocating, going out and saying, you need Odd Fellowship in your community. You need to be here. You need to have this as a part of your civic life. And so I am 100% behind the idea of rediscovering that sort of missionary style of odd fellowship where Grand Lodges will go into a community and say, hey, we've got this beautiful building. It used to be the heart of this community. We can make this into a wonderful, thriving part of your community. All it takes is you community members coming in and getting involved. And the one thing that I would say as sort of as a corollary to that, and Justin, I'm sure you've probably seen this during your time in the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, for that to be successful, you need to have a shift in focus by the members. Because what I have seen in my part of the country is there are so many older members, longtime members, who only think about what happens inside the walls of their lodge. They only think about what's going on in Odd Fellowship, in the meetings, and that's all. We got to fill out the warrant book correctly. We got to keep the minutes correctly. We got to make sure our annual report is correct. And that is all really important. But if your only focus is what happens inside, if you forget about that wonderful heritage that we have of the parades, of the Oddfellows picnics, of Oddfellows Day at the ballpark. You know, in 1909, when they had the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition in Seattle, Seattle hosted Sovereign Grand Lodge, and they had an Oddfellows Day at the AYP. And all of these things happened. They were all these great external things that showed people Odd Fellowship. You know, in the days when you did your shopping downtown and you chose what to buy based on what was displayed in the front window of the store, every downtown had an Oddfellows Hall. Well, nowadays we do our shopping online. It's on the internet. And so you have to have that awareness of the kind of presence that your lodge has in the community. We cannot expect to go forward and be successful if we do not have some sort of forward-facing front facade on the internet that random people can see and then go, oh, Oddfellows, that sounds interesting. I'll find out more about it. Maybe I want to join. We need to have that external focus. And I have found so many places that has kind of lost touch with that. And I understand it takes a lot of work when you have an older membership. It's hard to keep the building up. It's hard to always pick up the litter in front. People are used to only showing up there twice a month. So if something happens on the third Tuesday and nobody's at the hall, nobody realizes there's a problem with the building until the following week when people show up for a meeting. And then they ask Charlie and he says, oh, my grandson Todd is out of town, so he won't be able to come by for a couple weeks and clean that up. I understand it is very challenging to maintain lodges in some way. But the future, the path forward is letting people know that we exist. It's reclaiming that external focus that our lodges used to have when they would be the pride of the community.
And I say it all the time, we've pretty much secret society'd ourselves to death. And even though we're supposed to do our works without the expectation of attention or thank yous or anything like that, we still have to kind of brag on ourselves a little bit just as a way of letting people know we exist. And if we're bragging, if it's not bad to humble brag if it's genuine and if you're actually doing something. And little things you could do, you know, like I mentioned, the websites, get your lodge a Google business listing. So that way, when you type into Google Oddfellows Lodge, it's going to be the first thing that hits is going to be that Google business map. That's going to show that there's like, oh, look, there's 5 lodges in the, 5 county radius or whatever. Things like that are, there's so many easy, free little things that can be done that can make such a big impact. Because it's not just one thing that a lodge or a member or a Grand Lodge or a jurisdiction needs to do. It's like 100 little things, because one of them, it might not work at all, or maybe it was just a bad time for it. That doesn't mean it didn't work ever. You got to try it again another time or try it in a different way. It doesn't mean, oh, we tried it 20 years ago, it didn't work, we'll never do it again. That's the wrong attitude to have. So yeah, it's just constantly be doing something all the time. And even if you're not doing something, post something that you did once upon a time. Keep that ball in the air so people know about you.
Right now, when a lot of lodges are not meeting, what a perfect time to go on your lodge's Facebook page or your Instagram account and recount some of the history in your community. You know, we won the bowling trophy at the town bowling league in 1953, or we won the soapbox derby, or we won best float in 1982. In my associate lodge, Buckley 75, up on top of the piano, we have all of these beautiful trophies from things the lodge has excelled at. And the newest trophy is, I believe, 1985. So
Wow.
35 years old. And that tells you that at a certain point, the lodge said, well, we don't need to do that this year. I'm not sure we can handle that. Oh, I don't know if we can do that. And then after 5 or 6 years of being withdrawn, all of a sudden, it's like the lodge has formed a cocoon. And when your lodge gets to that point where it is 5 elderly men sitting around the kitchen table, the clock is ticking at that point. It becomes so hard to get that lodge back to a state where it's active and they're doing things that attract people who want to be members.
Yeah, we had, I've been to meetings. I know you guys have. They complain about everything that has happened since the automobile. And then they will complain about the TV. And then they will complain about computers. And then they always look at their phone and say, now everybody wants to stare at their phone. And I never had an answer to that until we started with smartphones and Facebook. And that's where we need to be. We need to be on there too. And for a lot of these lodges that are very sleepy, they don't have anything going on. There's enough stuff that floats across the world on Facebook right now. You don't have to do everything from your community, but still keep sharing things so that the community sees that there is Odd Fellowship happening. Make sure your lodge becomes Facebook friends with the borough, the Chamber of Commerce, and work with your neighbors around you. The associate encampment I belong to, it's about an hour and a half away, and we meet twice a month. Well, the lodge does, and then I go down once a month for encampment. But they have a band that meets there every week on a Wednesday night. Well, they're not paying us rent right now because they're not being able to perform gigs. So the one guy said to him, hey, you're not paying rent, that's fine. If we bought the paint and we bought the paint brushes because we're too old and we don't live close enough, can you paint the downstairs for us? Sure, you'll let us meet there for free. Why not? We're developing that friendship. It seems like the Grand Lodge just plays an intricate game of dot to dot, connecting the dots, connecting the prospective members to the lodges, connecting the lodges to each other. And if you can get these individual members, oh, you belong to this group, I belong to that group too. Well, I belong to something over here. I'm a member of the American Legion. We have an event tomorrow. I'm bringing one of my members from the American Legion to it to try and get him interested. If we can keep strengthening these dot-to-dot things, it'll really create something airtight again. And we just need to keep plugging away at that, one little bit at a time. It is a daunting thing. And, the old saying is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You just start, and just keep going at it until you're accomplished. And we'll never see a final ending by the end of it, hopefully. But we just got to keep doing something. We got to keep working towards something. And we can't give up hope, because the second you give up hope, that's it. So I learned very early in the military, that enthusiasm will get you anywhere. So we act like this is actually a thing that's working. We see by the numbers this is a thing that's working. It's going to start working again. We just got to keep at it and make it happen.
Well, that is wonderful. Now, is there anything else that either of you want to add to this episode before we jump to the Odd Podge?
I just had one last question for Justin. So as a Grand Secretary now and as a past Grand Master, do you have any advice to other Grand Lodges, specifically Grand Secretaries, on how to do better outreach or just how to be a better advocate for Odd Fellowship?
like you said before, it is the old way to kind of sit back and let the lodges do the work. And I would guarantee that every jurisdiction at least has one lodge in their state that is not working. And that's where the Grand Lodges need to start. The one piece of information that the Sovereign Grand Lodge always sends up that I find interesting are the Sovereign Grand Lodge rosters. You would not believe how many lodges I started going through, looking at these, going, hey, these guys joined in the 30s. They got to be really up there in age. And I had a lodge, they had 33 members on the books, and they were getting a quorum out, so 3 guys joined as an associate. By the time I got done Googling all these names of these members, all but 7 were dead. And they've been dead for 9 years. And it's, I talked to the guy who was Grand Secretary at the time. I said, why did you not look at this? The guy joined in 1921. Of course he's dead by now. Well, that's up to them to figure out. That's the problem. We got to start taking a front seat and start really getting active in helping out the lodges, calling them up during this time, calling the district deputies, and just making sure everybody's okay. And again, not that they're, like you said, numbering the warrants correctly or filling out their minute books, but just they're at least doing something. Because at the end of the day, if there's a lodge that isn't doing anything, what's the point of even having it exist in the first place? So, the Grand Secretaries, the Grand Lodges need to take a more proactive approach. And if you have a good Grand Lodge, but a older Grand Secretary, help him out and try and see if there'd be anybody who would be willing to help him take that front seat again. Because what's going to happen is that Grand Secretary is going to pass away, and the Grand Lodge is going to be left with nobody and no clue how to run everything. So the Grand Lodges need to start working together as one united front and really get back out onto the ground and help their lodges out. I mean, more than just meeting right and doing things right, but doing something in their community and bringing that legacy back into their area.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, you're doing just a fantastic job in Pennsylvania. And might I say, a very inspiring job. One of the great things about doing this podcast is it's getting us in touch with more of what's happening in various places around Odd Fellowship. And it's so wonderful to see that there are places where people are actively working to grow Odd Fellowship. I think you're doing a wonderful job there in Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for everything that you do on behalf of Odd Fellowship.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the Odd Podge. Now, before we give the Odd Podge, I want to let everybody know our next episode is going to be our Three Links Oddcast Christmas Spectacular. I love those old Christmas specials they used to do in December on TV. So we've decided we're going to get together and do a big Christmas special for all of you listeners out there. That's going to be our next episode, which will be out in a couple of weeks, just in time for the holidays. You can send the link to that episode to all your friends and family that you cannot see because of quarantining, and it'll be just like you're listening to the Three Links Oddcast Christmas special all together at home, but with no fear of transmitting coronavirus amongst yourselves. So everyone can stay very separate, but still experience the Three Links Oddcast. So for the Odd Podge here, who wants to go first? I know I've got mine ready. Ainsley, do you want to go first?
I'll go first, yeah. I always try to keep my Odd Podges a little happy and light, but I really had a lot of trouble kind of trying to come up with something for this episode because we've really been getting hit hard lately in Illinois with losing members passing away the last month or so. And we've lost some very, very, very loved members. And I just want to just give a quick kind of shout out to everybody who has lost somebody from their lodge this year. And I know Grand Lodge is going to be very, very sad next time we have it, hopefully in 2021. It's going to definitely be probably not a dry eye in the house whenever we do the necrology report. Some due to coronavirus and some due to other illnesses. But yeah, we're we're definitely noticing a hit right now. So that's kind of weighing heavily on me. And so I just wanted to, everybody check in with your members and make sure everybody's doing okay.
Especially those beloved senior members. One of the greatest gifts of Odd Fellowship are those wonderful longtime members that we get to meet and get to know. These are the guys who've been doing it. They've got their 50-year jewel, and they joined Odd Fellowship probably at age 12 when they entered a junior lodge, and then they applied to the Odd Fellows Lodge at age 21 as soon as they were old enough. And they've given so many years of their life to Odd Fellowship, and they have so many just incredible stories about what they have done and what Odd Fellowship has done in their communities, all the wonderful things that have happened, the lives that have been touched. So reach out and really put our virtues into practice. Call them up, email them, make contact and say, hey, brother, how you doing today? I know that I like to reach out and talk to certain members of the lodge and other lodges around me, just because I like talking to them. They are interesting and brilliant people. And it's always nice to get a phone call from somebody who says, hey, what's going on? How are things? So, Brother Justin, you have something you'd like to share with us for the Odd Podge?
Absolutely. And just real quickly to what Brother Ainsley was saying, it is a different year. And, my Rebecca Lodge is 10 years old this year, too. And we lost our first full member earlier in April, which happened to be my grandmother. She was a member years ago, and then when her lodge went defunct, she ended up dropping. But when we instituted in 2010, she wanted to be part of it again. And she ended up in a nursing home, and her mind wasn't there much anymore. She remembered me, but she'd repeat herself a lot. But one thing she remembered up until the day she passed away was she always remembered she was Rebecca. It was hard to do, but my wife and my best friend came out and they did the service at the viewing. And that is one thing to not, we lost a dear member up in Center County, Donald Trulick, who was killed suddenly in a car accident several years ago. And, when you lose members like this, that something like that knocks the air out of you. And if there's anything to tell these members, it's like, if you keep this lodge going, because if you keep this lodge going, do it for him, and that would be motivation when these older guys die. Hey, you need to keep this lodge going, because that's what they would have wanted. That's why they gave everything to be part of it. And switching to a lighter thing, just keep your ear to the ground for rumblings in Pennsylvania. I'm working with several members right now on bringing some old lodges back. There's an interesting one in Bethlehem. Keystone Lodge was the largest lodge at one time in Pennsylvania. That was the Bethlehem Steel Stacks.
Nice.
They had over 1,400 members.
Wow.
Now, they consolidated in 1975, but what we have from them, they had a book in 1924. It started in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and it made it all the way out west to California, only by way of lodge visitations. And each lodge got a page which they were able to draw in or put their embosser. And the ones like 600 people showed up with 120 automobiles, and all these lodges were in it. Guardian Lodge in Woodstock, Illinois, that's in it. This huge painting, there are some.
I would love to see a photo. I bet they would love to see a photo of that.
I got to get them on, because there's 2 huge volumes of it. It got all the way out to the Pacific Ocean and back. It was from 1924 to 1939. I mean, it was so neat. And this was called the Keystone Traveler. Started out at Keystone Lodge, and it's interesting. And I think there's a future for this lodge that has been gone for 45 years. So I'm hoping for it.
Bethlehem's is great little community. Well, I call it a little. It's a little city, is what it is.
Yeah,
and it's beautiful architecture. The Beth Steel is now a casino, but they have preserved the blast furnaces as a very unique backdrop for a outdoor music venue.
Yeah.
So, and I've actually tattooed a full back piece of the blast furnaces on somebody back when I was
cool.
tattooing in Stroudsburg.
Mhm.
So, Beth Steel is a very near and dear to my heart location for urbex and everything. So that's very cool.
Well, that is fantastic.
I'm still working in Monroe County too. We're going to get something going there. So,
well, let me
make it
know,
happen.
because I still got a good group of people there that I keep in contact with, and I'll hustle on them.
Well, that's fantastic. Best wishes for bringing back Keystone Lodge in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Well, speaking of Rebecca's, for my Odd Podge, I want to share something. Those of you who remember a couple episodes back, we had brothers Will and Mario from Family Lodge 293 in Hamilton, New Jersey. We talked to them about starting up their new lodge. Well, Will's wife is a Rebecca, and she has been putting together some great designs of some new Rebecca wear. Because, for Oddfellows, we have so many incredibly skilled and talented designers in the Oddfellows. They produce all kinds of great t-shirts and sweatshirts and other things like that you can buy. A lot of great stuff to show your pride as an Oddfellow. There's not been as much of that for the Rebeccas, but they recently put together a Zazzle store, the Fraternal collection. You can go to Zazzle and search for it. That's ZAZZLE.com, Zazzle. And you can find their Rebecca collection. I shared the link a couple days ago with our Rebecca Assembly Secretary here in Washington, which, by the way, we have a fantastic Assembly Secretary, Kathy Garcia. She is really great. She's really active and really goes out and does a lot to help the Rebeccas here in Washington. And she looked at it. She loved it. She says, Toby, thank you so much for sharing this. I just ordered a whole bunch of shirts, and I'm going to start showing them off to the Rebeccas here in Washington, and hoping that we can generate some more interest so that we can get some more products for Rebecca's. And she said she would especially love to see some new products come out for our Theta Rho girls. Because one thing we still have here in Washington is a good, strong Theta Rho program. And the girls would really love to have some cool, interesting new t-shirts, hooded sweatshirts, things like that they can wear and go to school and show off that they are members of the Theta Rho Club. So Kathy's very excited about the new stuff for Rebecca's, and she's doing her part to share it around here in Washington State, and hope that all the other Rebeccas will go out and buy those shirts too.
I have seen the designs. I think they're fantastic. And yes, I give a thumbs up.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. We want to thank Brother Justin Bailey for joining us from the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. It has been wonderful to have you as a guest here on the podcast, brother. And we wish you much continued success going forward. If there is anyone who can inspire a renaissance of Odd Fellowship in the Keystone State, I am confident it is you.
Well, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure. And all these people who are interested in joining the Odd Fellows, I'm sending them over to you guys on the Three Links Oddcast. I'm sending them up to Canada on the Modern Goat Rider. They are loving what they hear, and it's really helping out during this time when we really can't be there. This is needed now more than ever, and I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, brother. We appreciate it. And be sure and tune into our next episode for our Christmas special. Woohoo! All right. Take care, everybody.